Hello, I hope we're live now. Welcome to our YouTube live on supporting young men's mental health. I am so excited to be here today with Kadra Abdinasser, our Associate Director for Children and Young People's Mental Health, and also Ibrahim Hershey, one of the Centre's peer researchers. So welcome, guys.
Morning.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you guys here. So thank you to everyone who's watching live. We are going to be talking today a little bit more about supporting young men's mental health. And we'll be drawing heavily on our latest briefing, which we published just yesterday, which we will be putting a link to in the chat. But we'll also be drawing on recent research from our Shifting the Dial project based in Birmingham, which looked specifically at how COVID-19 has affected young Black men's mental health. And you can put all of your questions to Kadra and Ibrahim if you just stick them in the chat, and we will do our best to get through them all. But before that, Kadra, I just wanted to come to you and ask you, could you just tell us a little bit more about the briefing that we launched yesterday?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, we released our briefing yesterday called Trying Something New, which is based on learning from a comic relief funded program called Thriving, Not Just Surviving. The program launched in 2018 and has funded 23 projects across the UK who all aim to work to improve mental health outcomes for boys and young men. So the centre, we worked with Comic and the projects as a learning partner, which means that one of our wonderful colleagues, Juliet, supported the projects with learning and development and convened a series of events to share insights and problem solve together as a cohort. So our report is based on some of the key themes learning from the programme, and we also draw on existing research as well.
Amazing. And as I say, we will put a link to it in the chat so you can find out lots more there. But it's great to hear from you guys. And I'd love to ask you both, really, what would you say? So we've recognised that there is an increase in the number of boys and young men struggling with their mental health. And what would you say are the kind of key factors that are influencing this rise?
I think number one is that there's been a lot of defunding in like social services. So these are the places that, young men would tend to have, without the need of something like therapy, come together, kind of relax, de-stress, these kind of things. And when these things when these like kind of services get defunded, it becomes a lot more, they don't really have an outlet. Like there are not that many places for them to, like some of the outlets get closed off. I think that's one of the things. I think also just social expectations, like it's difficult for me to then go and say, I want to start therapy, like it wouldn't really be received well by maybe my peers, definitely by my family, my social circle. So I think that's a major thing as well.
Yeah, spot on, Ibrahim. And I just wanted to add as well, I guess there's been an overall rise in the mental health issues facing children and young people generally. And actually the latest survey tells us that young people have been impacted by lockdown, they've been impacted by poverty and household circumstances, like parental mental ill health or parental conflict. I guess for boys and young men, to an extent, there's been greater awareness of mental health amongst boys and young men, which means that, they may be benefiting from greater support in settings such as schools and colleges, and to a degree having their needs better identified. But I think I would also say that boys and men have been impacted by certain mental health inequalities a bit more acutely. So thinking about unemployment, homelessness, social services, as Ibrahim said, being in trouble with the law. And then there are boys and men who are caught at the intersection of various identities as well, and they often fare worse outcomes. So thinking about gay men, trans men, Black men, Muslim young men. So some of the projects as part of this program worked with boys who have, boys and young men at this intersection who've been impacted by trauma. So thinking about, through experiences of sexual abuse or coming from asylum-seeking backgrounds, their needs are just too often overlooked and poorly understood by services. So those might be some additional factors as well.
Yeah, thank you both. That's just so powerful to hear. And I think we've already sort of covered this a little bit, but is there anything more in terms of what the kind of key barriers are that are facing young men and boys kind of specifically in getting the mental health support that they need?
you want me to start on that, Ibrahim?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I would say stigma, sadly, is still an issue and is even more, prevalent amongst boys and men. Is largely driven by unhelpful gender stereotypes that boys and men should bottle up their feelings or just man up. The research also tells us that girls and women are twice as likely to report, a willingness to use mental health services. So we really need to unpack this. And also really understand that for boys and men, they may not present with mental health problems in, the typical ways to services. So their needs are not, properly understood. Often they are seen within the context of what they call externalizing behaviors. So they're seen as being, more physically or verbally threatening rather than some of those behaviors being seen as a sign of unmet emotional needs and, frustration in terms of not being able to get timely support.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think stigma is definitely like a major one. I think also it's like, let's say that let's say a young man that does, decide to go and do therapy, for example, right? Like how is that therapy going to happen? Is it something that's culturally fit for him? I think that's a really major thing. Is I think it's very difficult to find like therapists and things like that are able to connect with the young men, eh, especially from communities like ours, in a way that will make them want to come back, in a way that will actually benefit them, I think that's a really big one as well.
Yeah, that's such a critical point, isn't it? And it's something that we have, it's something that kind of spans both of these briefings, is the absolutely vital need for culturally competent, culturally informed approaches, and also just a representative workforce, people that young men can actually treat as kind of, role models and who actually understand what they are going through on some level. And I mean, kind of linked to that, I guess, I should just say for everyone watching, please do put your questions in the chat if you haven't already. But I've got another question here, which is kind of more about, where do you think that sort of mainstream or kind of traditional mental health services for young people, young men, are kind of going wrong in their approach?
I think, sorry. I think when I think, I think the best way to support young men with their mental health is by having like kind of like social for example youth clubs and things like that. I think those are the best ways to go, places where young men can congregate, where they can speak to people who are the same age and maybe even race and or at least the same background, and grow up in the same set of circumstances. And I think that is the better way, because then their friends in that community acts as almost the therapist, in the traditional sense. And I think when you add things like, I don't know, helping them get, for example, like if there was a organization that is specifically aimed at a certain young men for a demographic, young men for a certain demographic, but then that organization teaches men skills on top of that. I think that will do a lot, because again, like one of the main causes of mental health problems, right, is going to be poverty. So we need to find ways to alleviate those kind of things as well at the same time. So bringing them together, but also helping, these things that, you can have a therapist all you want, but if you're broke, it's going to be very difficult for your mental health to get better, right? So helping these kind of helping, poverty and all these other things, that sit outside,
Yeah, so spot on, Ibrahim. And just, to build on what you just said, I think, what we hear quite a lot from the boys and young men we work with is that also too often they're not aware of what services are available in their local area. They find it extremely challenging to navigate the system. And I think that is a wider problem within mental health services. They see the services as being too rigid, too formal, too clinical, and therefore, it's not really relevant to them. And just really pushing that message that Ibrahim just shared, not being supported by somebody who can relate to their experiences, regardless of their gender, background, whatever, that being like a huge barrier, and something that mainstream services are still not, responding to.
Could I just add one short thing? There's also a thing about who, because for example, like who is this going to reach, right? Let's say that we do that kind of workshops are held where you kind of help young people know about the services in the area and certain things, right? Who will that then reach? Because we know that the people who are affected most are like maybe homeless, who are maybe, you know, been expelled. So in what way can we get to these people that are, you know, the most vulnerable in society, right? Eh, I think that's also a major thing as well, because you can have as many workshops in schools, you can have as many online, you know, media campaigns, right? But is that going to reach them, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you both so much for speaking. So just on the point to that. But I guess moving on to this briefing that we did yesterday, and it was based on some projects funded by Comic Relief, specifically delivering tailored, accessible support to boys and young men for their mental health. And I mean, what were they doing differently to kind of what we've seen in mainstream services? How were they, how were they supporting young men's mental health?
Yeah, so they were implementing a range of different techniques and tactics really to reach boys and young men. So firstly, I would say, you know, going to where young men already are. So, you know, offering that outreach support within community-based services, promoting, you know, inclusion as a result, and also early intervention in mental health. Offering flexibility, whether the young men wanted to engage in group-based activities or have that more one-to-one support. And also flexibility in terms of timing. So, you know, having that out of our 7-day-a-week services, some of the projects were offering. Some of them were really using creative and sporting activities and blending a therapeutic, also having really effective signposting pathways to mental health services. So a lot of these projects use, you know, activities such as boxing, football, working with barbers in the local community to train them up around having mental health conversations, using filmmaking, for example, as like a hook to bring boys and young men in. Another really interesting finding for us was around, well, I mean, it's not surprising or at all, but really thinking about language and terminology used by services. So a lot of the projects found, you know, using terminology such as activity was a lot more effective than, you know, branding their project as a health or mental health service. And, you know, using more asset-based language. So for example, regaining control rather than, you know, like poor mental health, for example. And I think remote working has been interesting. It's been a bit of a mixed picture. So for some boys and young men, it's been extremely successful way for them to access support and advice. For others, actually, you know, because of inequalities they face in their lives, you know, remote working has just not worked for them. And, you know, because of things like poor digital connection, privacy issues. So we've been a bit worried about what it means for those young men who've disengaged from services during lockdown, and hopefully as things reopen, they're able to re-engage with services again.
I mean, thanks for that. It's so helpful. It's so exciting actually to hear about this range of projects going on, this real wealth of like innovative approaches to young men's mental health, and especially what you said there about kind of the need for like just the language to be right. So kind of just moving away from this kind of very formal mental health interventions to kind of like actually just helping people like, yeah, regain control, which is just a lot more accessible, a lot more informal. So that's hopeful. And Ibrahim, you've obviously been working on Shifting the Dial, the project that we're involved with in Birmingham. And I just wondered if you wanted to tell us a little bit more about the kind of what you've learned from the peer research process, what you've picked up about supporting young men's mental health.
Yeah, I wanted to also
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
just after what Kadri said, but you know what, they connect anyways. Because I was just gonna say, you know, that stuff that makes me really happy, because the thing about using boxing and football and filmmaking and all of this kind of stuff to support, because the community is like the support network, right? So you need to have spaces where the community can congregate. I think it's really important, where they can come together and where they can do things that, for example, boxing, right? They can stay in shape. they will, you know, with the trainer or whatever, they have like a mentor, and then they also help them with their mental health, right? I think all of these things are important. And so the work that I was doing with Lightpost is essentially doing a very similar or the same thing, but they are a theatre troupe, right? Um, um, what I found out that is that community is so important. So I haven't gone to them in a year just because, you know, I just moved on. But I was watching the play that they did a few days ago, and I got allowed to go backstage in privileges, and
Nice one.
I was just chilling with the guys, and the ecstasy, the excitement, the enjoyment, you know, the joy was, you know, it was, you could feel it in the air, you know. And it's about having a place where you guys can come together, where you don't have to have, you know, any where you can build like a really strong community, and you don't have to hide anything from each other. And when you're building something like boxing, obviously only people who really like boxing or who really want to get into boxing are going to come, right? And so you've got people who already got a very similar, you know, a kind of similar hobby, and so it becomes easier to, you know, it's gonna be like it's more chance they're gonna gel more, right? The people as a cohort. And this is what I found with Lightpost, you know. And so a lot of the people there were, I mean, everyone's best friends when I went there. Like literally, everyone was really tight. And then we just chilling. I was speaking to them for a few hours. We grabbed food or whatever, and it's just like the happiness everyone felt. You know, it was lovely. So I think community, there needs to be like a really big push to, you know, kind of community support group. And I think earlier we were talking about, you know, the effect that lockdown has had on mental health, and it has, because I've like 6 months I hadn't seen any of my friends from school, right? You just working or rising, no friends from school, anything. That community is completely broken off, right? And it becomes a lot more difficult. Your mental health go, you know, takes a plunge and things like that. So building like a community, I think is really, I keep on saying community, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for that, Ibrahim. And it's really helpful to have that insight as well into like what Shifting the Dial has been doing. And I think we've put a little link to that in the chat so you can see our latest work on that. But thank you so much. And you're completely right. Like community support, like culturally relevant support is just vital. And I think that's maybe what we're sometimes not seeing in services, which are, of course, you know, we know that they are under resourced, but I think it's just, as other people have said, it's not always about you know, doing more. It's sometimes just like doing differently, and how can we do it differently to actually reach people. But kind of something I was just thinking about is, you know, are we saying then that we need male only specific services? And also, I guess then where does that leave us for kind of trans and non-binary young people?
Yeah, I guess before I get into that, I'm just so jealous, Ibrahim, that I misconstructed. It looked like it was, yeah, an amazing performance. And actually, the performance was based on boys and men on construction sites, and like trying to tackle issues around like mental health and masculinity within that context, which I just think is super fascinating. And I'm so gutted I missed it. Yeah, but just in response to your question, Thea, I guess I don't think we do necessarily need male only services. I think it's about designing mental health support that effectively meet a diverse range of needs and are able to tailor and adapt support for different groups. So this can be, you know, done effectively by investing in training on specific strategies to support boys and young men and other groups, building real effective partnerships with community organizations, that keyword Ibrahim was going on about, community, and really ensuring that actually there's a safe platform for boys and men to be heard in decision making. I think that, you know, too many people with lived experience of mental health are, again, not given an opportunity to shape and design and inform services, and that's both at the national and local level. For trans and non-binary young people, again, we definitely need to move beyond gender binaries. And we know that actually trans and non-binary people, they're much more likely to you know, face risk factors for poor mental health, such as bullying, abuse, exclusion, discrimination from services as well, sadly. So there's much more research needed in this area. But we're really pleased to know and work alongside other organizations that are trying to shine a spotlight on this issue, such as Mermaids and Just Like Us. They've done some work recently on trans and LGBT young people's mental health. And yeah, I think we need to kind of continue to push on that, especially given the kind of harmful narratives in the national kind of debate around you know, LGBT rights, I think is something that, you know, all of us need to continue to challenge and, you know, make sure we center lived experience as part of that.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. That's really helpful. I think, yeah, it sounds like there's a long way to go, but yeah, it's great to hear this is all like being considered. And just kind of bring in a different angle here, Ibrahim, like I wanted to ask you, you know, obviously I think there has been a bit of a rise of kind of male mental health kind of role models in the public sphere, a little bit more men speaking out about their mental health. And I guess I just wanted to know, like, do you think that is having an impact in reducing, you know, stigma around, you know, young men talking about their mental health?
I do think it does. I really do think it does. And I think also just with the rise of social media and a lot of people all over, you know, like social media being able to come out and like speak about mental health and their experiences, it just makes people feel a lot more comfortable. However, I do think what has happened is because there are so many people um, now speaking out about it, there's like this weird notion that's going around where people are like, you're overdoing it, or you're just doing it for attention, or this kind of stuff that then kind of peeps up as well. Um, and so I think that's kind of like a problem, like an unintended side effect that's come out of it. But then again, like I think something like that was always going to happen with the rise of, with the, you know, with any type of pressure being put on, with any type of, you know, wanting of mental health to kind of come out into the public, right? Or people, or to be more of a, to be something that more people speak about, and it be more of like a national discourse or whatever. So yeah, although I do think it definitely helps, though I still do think that it definitely helps. Um, yeah, but then again, I think like you can still have as many people, as many celebrities talking about mental health. You know, if there are not services there that are fit for young people, it's the dent isn't going to be as big as, you know. I think it needs to. I think the kind of I think the way you kind of attack the issue needs to be from multiple, you know, places.
Yeah, 100% completely agree. Kaja, is anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I was just going to say spot on. And if you're talking about Piers Morgan in terms of, you know, calling people out, just ignore him, to be honest. And I think, you know, the mental health sector has been doing a great job in terms of like challenging some of that. I mean, we saw recently with Naomi Osaka, it still seems to be like an yeah, a persisting issue. But I think, yeah, there's more people who are in support of people who speak out about mental health than the small minority who, you know, call them out for attention seeking or whatever. But yeah, still needs to be challenged.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. A lot of truth there. So as I sort of bring us into land, I just wanted to ask you both, you know, looking at these briefings, looking at the work we've been doing across Birmingham and with the Comic Relief Project, you know, what would you say, both of you, needs to happen at both local and national levels for young men, boys to get the mental health support that they really need? Oh, Ibrahim, I think you're, oh, there we go. Great.
I was actually speaking to my friend about this yesterday. I think one of the main things that needs to be done is really try and get the most vulnerable, you know. I think we need to figure out ways. I don't know how to say we, but I think ways need to be figured out to get the most vulnerable, you know, the people who are really like on road, the people who are, you know, really like in that kind of, you know, gang life or whatever, the people who are in the homeless, the people who have been expelled and are in those centers. You know, I think we really need to figure out ways to get those people who is probably for them the most difficult, you know, and the people who are living in the most difficult set of circumstances to take part in these initiatives. And I think we need to figure out ways to, I think strategies need to be made in a way to get those, because I think those are also the most difficult people to get to take part in these initiatives, you know. I think that's really, really important. I think that's where I think that's how you're going to get the most long-term change. If you get like the people who are suffering the most in society, if you help them get better or give them the tools to get better, you know, then you know, I think that's really the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ibrahim. And I think, if you get it right for those people facing, the harshest inequalities, you're much more likely to create universal services that meet like a broader range of needs. So just to kind of add to that, with our briefing as well, we made like a number of recommendations based on learning from the project. So, Ibrahim touched on this already earlier, but I think we need the government to really, really invest in local authorities to help rebuild those community-based youth services who've been, decimated because of austerity. We need the government also to have a national cross-government commitment to tackling inequalities and discrimination within mental health. And a recent sort of recommendation we've been pushing for is for the Department for Education to introduce a temporary pause on school exclusions. We know that boys and young men are harshly impacted by that, but also within the context of lockdown and disruption to learning, we don't think it's a really helpful tool to use during this time. And also locally, coming back to that point around thinking about the workforce and diversifying the workforce, that's something the Shift in the Dial program in Birmingham is seeking to do, to try and attract more Black boys into the NHS system itself, to really tackle that overrepresentation as patients in acute services. And really, just building on some of the learning from the projects at the local level, thinking about how these approaches, these quick fixes can actually be embedded within existing services already.
Amazing. Well, I think you guys have nailed that answer. I think we are going to finish in just a moment, but thank you as well, Kadra, specifically for speaking to that point about behaviour and the pause on school exclusions. I know that's something that Ibrahim was talking a lot about, the impact of exclusions as well. We are planning to publish a blog tomorrow by our very own Kadra about behaviour in schools and kind of recent policy and rhetoric changes around that and what needs to happen to really support young people's mental health in schools. So we will be launching that tomorrow. But as I say, there's so much more on our website, on our social media. You can follow us at Centre for MH. Do keep putting your questions to us and on social media, and we'll do our best to answer them as the days go on. But for now, I just want to say a huge thank you to Kadra and to Ibrahim. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us. We're so grateful to hear from you. And thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Bye.